Baruch Hashem. Today's daf is Maseches Chullin. Actually, there's a daf for Shabbos Kodesh. We're on Erev Shabbos. So today's daf, we begin the new tractate of Chullin Daf Beis. So Chullin deals with the laws of, how do you make an animal kosher? Not kosher to be brought as a korban, as a sacrificial offering, but kosher so that you can eat it, which is called chulin, as opposed to kachim. Kachim is sacred, and chulin, right? Chol, meaning something you can eat regularly. So the Mishnah says, hakol shochten, everyone can shecht. Rashi says, wherever it says the word hakol, it's coming to teach us something. And these are explained in the beginning of Tractate Orchin, that every time everyone, when it says everyone can do this, it's coming to include something. And here, our Gemara and our daf is going to start a dispute. What is this hakol coming to include? According to some, one opinion is coming to include somebody who slaughters in a state of tumah, and according to others, it's to include either a kusi or a mumar. See, people who are heretics or not, or their Jewish lineage is unsure. So a kol shochten, everyone can slaughter the animal, and about this because it says ushchitas and kshera, and their slaughter is valid, but it's only valid b'diavad. The word shchitas and kshera means it's okay b'diavad. So the Gemara is going to try to discuss that. Chutz micheres shot v'katim, with the exception of a minor, a deaf, mute, or a shota, one who's not of sound mind. These are people who don't have agency. But what about a woman? A woman is not mentioned here. So it would seem that it's permitted, but Tosfos cites a position of the Hilchos Eretz Yisrael, so that women cannot do shlita because maybe their minds are not strong enough to handle it, meaning the blood and the gore. But Tosfos rejects that position because he says we know that they are able to slaughter sacrifices, as it says in Zevachim. So the Shulchan Aruch rules that women can be shochtim. Ramah says that the minhag is not to. So Sephardim, the minhag is for women to be shochtim, but not for Ashkenazim. Anyway, we continue with the exception of a chereshot of a cotton. Why? Shema yikalku shchitasim. Maybe they're going to mess up the shchita. The kulin sheshachtu, and anyone who does the slaughter of acherim roano's son, and others are standing next to them and looking at it. Shlitas and kshera. The shlita is going to be kosher. So the Gemara is going to analyze this Mishnah closely. Hakol shochten, that implies, says the Gemara, that everyone can slaughter even initially. But shlitas and kshera, but their shlita is kosher, that implies diavad, that implies b'diavad. So which is it? Is everyone able to slaughter or only b'diavad? So the Gemara answers, Amar Rav Acha Brei de Rava or Rav Ashi. So Rav Acha Rava says to Rav Ashi, "V'kol hakol chatchilahu." Anytime it says the word hakol, does that really mean lichatchilah? That means that you could do something initially. Well, what about the fact about as it relates to the inyan of tamura? Tamura is the idea that you're not allowed to exchange a korban for another animal. If you do it, you're in violation of a prohibition, but it takes effect. It takes effect if you do it. So the first mission in Tamura says as follows: don't we say? We say there, hakol memirin, anyone can do a tamura, echad anashim, ve'echad anashim, both men and women. And the reason why it has to mention women there is because the passage in the Torah is mentioned in the masculine. So, hachinami du lechatchila. Who would you say by tamura it's also even lechatchila? It can't be, because the whole concept of tamura is b'diavad. You're not supposed to do a tamura. You're not allowed. You're supposed to exchange the animal. So if that's the case, we know for sure that hakol is not lechatchila. So the Gemara answers, Hasam there with respect to the tamura, the answer is Hasam kedekatani taima. There, the Tana explains the reason why it says it. Why it says that's not what it means. It means Moshe Adam Rashayla Amir. There, the Tana says explicitly, it's not that a person is allowed to do the Tamura. Ela she'im himir mumar besofek esarbaim. There, it just means that if you did it, it takes effect. So Rashi says the ikar la hakol dereisha. The akar la hakol dereisha. meaning to say it uproots the first hakol. The lo temu lechatchila, who don't say it's lechatchila, but kol shochten, but our hakol beduchtakai is staying in its place. It's lechatchila. The kol kama lo akrei, that wherever it was not uprooted, vitana lo sheyu apsulim rishayim l'shchot kida akarhas. And there it says not that those are disqualified or allowed to slaughter it. Masman do chatchilu rabinu. V'hader tani ushchitas and kshera. The masma diavad. Meaning to say, the case over there, hasam kidikatani taima, that there in the case of Tamura, the explanation is said right there in the text of the is said right there. The akra called the ratio, the otemo chatchilu, meaning to say the Gemara, when the Gemara says kitikatani taima, Gemara says that there is an akira and change from the simple explanation of akol, meaning to say they taught not that a person is allowed to do it. So, meaning to say, not that we should think hakol is lechatchila, but here hakol shochten in our Mishnah beduchtakai, it stands in its regular place, meaning lechatchila. The kol kamen lo akarbe, that the Tana didn't totally uproot it. The Tana lo sheyu psulim rishayim l'shchot kida akar hasam, and he said not. It doesn't say that the psulim are permitted to slaughter, like it says there. Like in Tamura, it says not that you should do it. Mashma d'lechatchila rabinu. So the implication of here is that it's lechatchila. V'hader tani, and then it says shchitas and ksher. Mashma di'eved. Meaning to say there it was completely uprooted, so we have nothing to worry about our question. Our question doesn't take effect there. So the Gemara gives another explanation, another question of hakol where it's not lechatchila. Ela hakol ma'arichin v'ne'arachin nodrin v'nidarin. So there, everybody can make a erachin is where we're going to get to that where you make a vow. You're going to give your value erachalai to the temple, or you make a neder. Everyone can do it, and it takes effect. And hachinami dochatchila. And would you say also that's also lechatchila? V'haksiv, it says there v'ki techtolin dor. Well, you have a chachet. If you don't make a vow, you're not sinning. But tiv tova shar tidor mishatidor v'otashalim. Better not to vow. Vitanya told me the best thing is to do is not to vow at all. Rabbi Yehuda told me no dur mishalim. So Rabbi Yehuda says, fine, you can. The best thing is to make a vow and pay. Rabbi Yehuda lo kamar ela ba'omer harei zu. Rabbi Yehuda only says that it's good to make a vow where you say this animal is for hektish. We didn't say he consecrates a specific animal and he's not guaranteeing it. He's not responsible. And so therefore there's no concern that he's going to come violate a vow, the idea of a vow. But if a person says, I am going to give, I have guaranteed that I'm going to give this some money, Rabbi Yehuda would not agree. And so we see from here that hakol is certainly not lechatchila, because nobody would say that everybody should go around running around making vows. So the Gemara says, you mean to say, v'lo. Also, I just want to say at the beginning, we pointed this out several times. The beginning of the tractate is more likely to deal with these types of like introductory questions to the topic. And here the introduction is about the language of hakol in the Mishnah. So ela hakol, well, Gemara says the kol hakol lav lechatchila. I mean to say that hakol does not mean lechatchila. Aren't there places where hakol does mean lechatchila? Meaning to say, Rav Achaz just proved that from the case in Erechin that hakol is not lechatchila. But we're going to now say that hakol is lechatchila. What about the fact that the Mishnah says, Ela hakol chayavim b'sukkah? Everybody's obligated in sukkah. Hakol chayavim b'tzitzis. Everybody's obligated in tzitzis. Hachinami d'lav lechatchila. Would you say that this is not lechatchila? Obviously, these mitzvahs are lechatchila. As it says, hakol osim kach v'kach, meaning to say, hakol chayavim kach v'kach. Everybody has to do these mitzvahs. So the Gemara says, no, don't bring a proof from these mishnayos because chayavin lo kamina. I didn't teach this that he said chayavin, which would implies. I didn't say that when the Tana said chayavin, it means b'di'evet, because obviously if there's no lechatchila or b'di'evet when it comes to being chayiv. I only said when I said hakol, when everybody can do this, like hakol shochten, I was saying that is not necessarily lechatchila. So it says Rav Ashi El Me'ata hakol somchin. echad anashim ve'echad anashim. That's not chayavim. That's not a lashon of obligated. And would you say that that's not lechatchila? Achinami delav lechatchila. V'aksiv v'samach yadov v'nirtzo. You have to do it. Gemara says that Rav Acha responds to Rav Ashi in Ika Hakol lechatchila. Yes, it is the case that Hakol. There are some hakols that are lechatchila. The ika called diavad. So Rav Acha says yes. Sometimes it is lechatchila, but sometimes it's b'diavad. El hakol dahacha mimayd lechatchila the tikshilach. Why are you so bothered by the hakol here that it's that you're going to say that it's lechatchila? Dilma diavad who below tikshilach. Maybe it's b'diavad, and you're not going to be bothered. Amalei. So Rav Ashi says back to Rav Acha. Anan shchitasan kshera kashui. He says, I am bothered by the fact that it says the shchita is kosher. I mean, the tani shchitasan kshera is diavad miklal da'akol lechatchila. From the fact that shchitasan, the second clause is b'diavad, that proves that the first clause is meant lechatchila. The diavad, because if hakol shochtein is only b'diavad, is only ex post facto, tartu diavad lamali. Why would we need two b'diavads? But 1 second, why is Rav Ashi saying that he was the one who was bothered by the question? The way the Gemara begins is not with Rav Ashi asking the question. The way the Gemara begins is with hakol shochtein lechatchila shchitasan kshera diavad. It's with the stomach the Gemara, the anonymous Gemara. So Tosfos says, Mashma Rav Ashi hiksho so kushya. It's implied that Rav Ashi was the one who started off with the question. And even though this seems to be like the sugyas of the Gemara, even though this is just the anonymous Gemara, from here it's a proof that Rav Ashi arranged the whole Gemara. Okay. Anyway, that's what Tosfos points out to it. So anyway, now we have the question that Rav Ashi is asking that Akol implies lechatchila and shchitasan kshera implies b'diavad. So how do we answer this question? Is it everybody could slaughter lechatchila or b'diavad? So we have several answers to this question. So first, the Gemara says, Amar Rav Bar Ua, Hachi Ketani. This is what it means. It means as follows. Hakol shochten, when it says everybody can slaughter, va'afilu Tamei b'chulin, meaning to say, what's the akol coming to include? Even somebody who is tamei, even somebody who's ritually impure, he's allowed to slaughter the regular meat, chulin, even lichatchila. And the Gemara says, what are you talking about? The Gemara interrupts his question. Tamei b'chulin, my l'meimra b'chulin. Meaning to say, why do you need to tell us this? It's obviously the case that he could slaughter lechatchila, because this is not kachim. We're not talking about kachim anymore. We're talking about chulin. There's no such thing. We don't have to be worried that a tamei is going to make the chulin tamei. So the Gemara says, yeah, we do, because there were some people who ate their chulin, waiting, like always eating their chulin in a state of ritual purity, because they wanted to be ready to eat their kachim in a state of ritual purity. So it's talking about a case of chulin shenasu al taras hakodesh. We're talking about chulin where the owner of the animal accepted upon himself to eat the food as though it was kachim. He wanted to get ready for it. Rashi writes, chulin shenasu al taras hakodesh tekibu alel le'achol b'taras hakodesh. He accepted upon himself. He wants to get used to the idea of eating kachim. So he's very careful about guarding himself and protecting himself. Because Savar and the Tana of our Mishnah says, Chulin shenasa al taras hakodesh kodesh tamel. And the Tana of our Mishnah says, once he accepted upon himself, like eating it according to the levels of purity, it becomes like kodesh, and it's like almost like a vow, so to speak, and he has to separate himself rabbinically from all tumos that will be disqualified. And nevertheless, the lechatchila person who is tamei can shecht it. Nevertheless, he's allowed to shecht it lechatchila if he's going to be careful not to touch the meat and to make the meat tamei. And he's going to do it, as the Gemara says, with a long knife. So what does he do? Maybe sakin aruka, he brings a long knife. He slaughters it with a knife so that he won't touch the meat. So the Gemara says, but hold on 1 second. Okay, anyway, so there's a whole Indian here about this very important concept of Chulin Shana Sal Taras HaKodesh. What does he do? He brings a long knife and he slaughters it. But if it's Kodshim, that he would not be able to slaughter. Shema Yigav B'Batzar. Maybe he'll touch the meat, and if he touches the meat, that'll make it tummy. And Rashi says, Dibra Maskal with kachim, he can't even slaughter with a long knife, because since he's warned from the Torah not to make the kachim tamei, and so therefore the rabbis made a decree that lechatchila not to do it. So v'im shachat v'omer barli shalom nagati, and if he slaughters the kachim and he says, I'm absolutely certain that I did not touch it, shachat v'omer barli shalom nagati shlitaso ksher, then it'll be kosher b'di'evet. Chutz mecherashot v'katan, dafil b'di'evet, dafil b'chulin greda di'evet namilo, except for a cherashot v'katan, and even b'chulin itself, b'di'evet namilo. Also by chulin, it's even b'di'evet not okay, because shema yishu, shema yidrasu, shema yachidu. There are 5 things that disqualify the shechita. It's called asechad, and I'll just say them very briefly. We'll go into them. We have time. The shehiyah, drasa, chalada, grama ikor. So we're concerned that maybe that maybe the chereshot katan will violate shehiyah, which is pausing too long, yidrasu, pressing down too hard, not cutting it, but pressing it, chopping it, or yachidu is like borrowing the knife. So v'kuan sheshachtu, and so the Gemara says, how would he explain the final part of this Mishnah? V'kuan sheshachtu and other sort of kosher. Ahai, what's it talking about? If you want to say it's referring to the chereshot v'katan, alaka, he's already spoken about them. He's already said that their shlita is no good, even b'di'evet. He's already said that. Why would say v'kuan, which would imply that he's speaking about additional people? Meaning to say, he just said, with the exception of chereshot v'katan, that even that's no good. And then you say, but why would he say v'kuan sheshachtu? It doesn't make sense to add that in. So it can't be referring to that. V'im shachtu me, by the way. It should have said v'im shachtu. Ela atame b'chulin. So it refers to somebody who's tamei while he wants to slaughter the chulin. It can't be that. He says even lechatchila could slaughter. Ela atame b'mekdashim. So it must be that it's referring to someone who is tamei and he slaughters the hektish, and he's saying, which we just said, that b'di'evet he shouldn't do it. However, we're saying that it can't be that, because we said that if acherim roam also, we've already said, even if they didn't so, if he says the barley sagi, it's okay b'di'evet. If he says, I'm sure I didn't touch it. So the Gemara says, yeah, but the leisel, come on, we're talking about there's nobody there, so he can't say barley in a shaila. And so therefore, if others saw it, and even though he doesn't say anything, it's kosher. So the Gemara says, what are you talking about? If you want to say that shlitas tamei b'mukdashim is learned from our Mishnah, mehasem nafka, it should have been learned out. We already learned this. Ko apsu and sheshachtu shlitas and shera. Shlitas and shera bezarim benashim avan and tmeim v'afil kachim kachim uvachol yitmei and nogim and basar. It says explicitly, as long as they didn't touch it when they're tummy there. So the Gemara says, hacha ikar, here is the main teaching. Awesome, that I did the tani sharp so and tani name tami mukdashim. So here's the main point, and there was just because it was just mentioned in passing, and so that's the first answer to this question. We buy more alternatively, hasam ikar de bekachim kai. There, it's the main thing is it's kachim. Hacha I did tana, I did tani be tami bechuin tani name tami b'mukdashim. So here it also mentions it because it's already discussing. It's already discussing chulin, so it also mentions the kachim in passing. So, okay, that's the daf for Shabbos, and we'll go over this Baruch Hashem on Shabbos Kodesh. Everybody should have a good Shabbos.